Right. Hey, hi.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah. Pleased to be here in the beautiful valley of Harrington Valley, which looks like exactly the same as it was back in the 50s, eh? So this is really a nice place to be here. So I took the liberty to propose to Chloe that topic, talking about First Nation, First People. Even though I'm not one of them. As an historian, we always look at the past the way that we were brought up, okay? So our our vision of the past changed through times, and it changed a lot. Uh, the more the more we are getting into the narrative of history of the first people history, the more we understand the way that they were looking at the territory, space, and their own history. So I was just talking with my wife on the way here and explaining to her what I was going to talk about today. And I said, I do feel comfortable to talk about their history as an historian, but I do not feel comfortable to talk about the way they think. And this will not be the topic of this presentation. I know that they have a vision of what was the past before, which is, it's close to a spiritual history of planet Earth with Mother Earth and the big tortoise and everything. But I'm really not found comfortable to talk about that. So I will mainly today talk about the way we saw their history, the way that we found traces of their passage here in Argenteuil. Because, we had the chance to have archaeologists who came here before, and they dig the ground, they found tools, they found artifacts that can explain the movement of these people and what were they doing, and who were they, and who were they, and what kind of life were they living here. So, so we start with changing here. Thanks, Gloria. Okay, a long time ago, here in Harrington, there were probably beaches of the Champlain Sea, because the Champlain Sea was going up north up to Mont-Laurier. So that was about 10,000 years ago. Before that time, it was ice, mainly ice. Ice would cover the territory of Argenteuil for up to a kilometer high. 1 kilometer high of thickness of ice that was over everything. So you can imagine when the earth kind of warmed, the way the ice melt, it picked up big rocks, boulders, immense, really big boulders, and it traveled, it kind of retreated from south to north, carrying those big boulders. So if you ever wonder walking through the woods or, just on the other side here in the fields, why are they big boulders, big rocks there? It was because of the ice, the melting of the ice. A kilometer of ice could carry a rock as big as this place here, easily. So it kind of retreat, carry the rocks, and then left the rocks there. So all of Argenteuil is filled with those big boulders, right? We could even build houses or even a kitchen on top of these boulders. So by retrieving and then left water, water was a Champlain Sea. We could change So you see here, that was the ice. And this is about 13,000 years ago, which is not really old in Earth history, right? Because Earth history is about 5 billion years. So, and we're up to 13,000 years ago. So probably this is what the theory of a certain archaeologists and historian, that there was a passage through which the first people traveled and came up to here. We know from archaeological finds that in the Gaspasian valley and the Gaspasian territory there were people living in those times, 13,000 years ago. As for Argenteuil, we have to wait for the melting of the ice, so we can change the slide. We have big lakes. We are close here. So the ice is melting again. It changed. 13,000 years ago, we have the Champlain Sea here. And you see the ice was covering everywhere here, which is quite different than in the southern part of America. When we think about Mexico, we think about the southern part of the United States. There were probably people living there in those times. But for us in Quebec, especially in Argenteuil, there was nobody living here because there was the ice, or either ice or it was the Champlain Sea. We could change again. We have the Champlain Sea here. So you see, Montreal, Ottawa, we are close here, around here. So all of this was underneath, what we'd say about 100 meters of water. And in those water swam big, big, big fishes. We could see the other slide. Oh, okay. 541 million years ago, 13,000 years ago, we saw Mont Royal coming out of the ground. Mont Royal and all the Montérégiens mountains like Mont Saint-Grégoire, Mont Saint-Hilaire, Rougemont, all of these mountains came out because of the melting of the ice. So the ice was pushing down the earth crust, really pushing down with the weight. And by retrieving, the water was less heavier than the ice. So it kind of, so certain islands, certain mountains pop up of the territory. It's like the earth crust is like a mattress that always go back to its original form. So you sleep on the mattress, okay, you lie down, so it's gonna pull that, and by getting up out of the bed, whoop, the bed takes the original shape. So the earth crust is about the same thing, okay? It's always manageable. So it's moving and it's a living thing. But this is what we saw here. We could change the slide. That's about the height of the Champlain Sea. See, that was the Radio-Canada Tower in Montreal, the old one. So it was over. So Montreal was underneath water. Even Montreal. Okay, so we can change slide again. So this is where I was coming to. Okay, we have here Champlain Sea. We have here Argenteuil, Terre-Neuve, Mont-Laurier. So the Champlain Sea was going really up north, and here we were probably the beaches. Probably it was probably beaches here, and everywhere there is a shell, that means that we found traces of living things that was, living in the Champlain Sea. So shells, fossils, part of certain fishes, okay? And by digging the ground, okay, now we're going away. So the Champlain Sea turned out to be 9,000 years ago, Lampsillus Lake. Lampsillus Lake, that's an Algonquin word that means Lampsalis means whales. So it was the lake of the whales. So now you're figuring where I'm going to. So probably up to here, it could have been whales coming up to here. Okay, we know that because switch. Okay, we found fossils of certain seals and walrus all around the territory. And if we are here, see around Ottawa here, we found lots of things. And we even found in Smith's Falls, by digging the ground, you can switch, ancient unpacked whales at Smith's Falls, okay? So this is what we found there. I was in 1860, around 1867, okay? That we found fossils of whales in Smith Falls. Can you imagine that? So that means probably that the whales would come up to here, almost up to here, or down the valley, the Ottawa Valley, that's for sure. Okay? So this is why the First Nation, the first people, named that lake Lampsalis Lake. So does that mean that they lived around here? Probably they lived around the lake 9,000 years ago. That was way before our time. Okay, switch. Okay. What happened next? Okay. The water retreat, the river came. We had Ottawa River, and then the Lac de Deux-Montagnes, and then the St. Lawrence River, and then people came and settled. Well, settled. They kind of travel around the territory. They probably end up in the southern part of Argenteuil. They probably arrived near a place called the Long Sault, right? Carillon, and then Grenville, and they probably lived in these the southern part, because it was probably it was more friendlier for them to settle there. So they came there around 6,000 years ago. I brought a couple of artifacts here that were digged from the ground of Argenteuil in St. Andrews, and then in Grenville, and then in St. Philippe. And those artifacts are dated up to 6,000 years ago. So we know that these people came here 6,000 years ago. Now that means, you know, in the old saying, we would say 4,000 BC, right, before Christ. It's kind of old, really old. And what were they doing? They were probably hunters. They were probably, you know, pickers, you know, berry pickers. And they were probably, they were fisher. They were fishermen too, because of the rivers. And you know, by the time Champlain arrived here in Argenteuil in 1613, they were fishing salmon. Salmon in the Ottawa River, salmon in the Red River, and salmon in the North River, up to Lachute. Salmon used to go up to Lachute to fray. Frayer. Spawn. Thanks. We still are there. So, from 6,000 years ago up to the time that the French arrived with Jacques Cartier in 1534 here in what they call New France. The way that the French and all the European, the way it works, they were sons of the kings, right? Sons of the kings. The kings had their power directly from God. They didn't have the power directly from the religious. They were in connection with God, okay? So they could take over any places that they want, like saying things like, we take possession of this land in the name of our king, our Lord. So when they arrived here, this is what they did, no matter who was living here. So at that time, everything changed. They arrived here, they took possession of the territory, and for those who were here living before, they, at that time, their history was not considered. Nothing was considered about who they were. They had to change and become just like be like us. So they had to believe in another God, believe in another way of politics works. It was the politics of man. As for them, they were more matriarchal societies. It was the women who had the power. It was the elders who had the power, which was quite different, way different. The men had their roles, you know, they were warriors or they were hunters, and the women took control of everything, which was the way it was. But by the arriving of the French and the English and the Spaniard down in the southern part of America, everything changed. They brought their way of living, and then they imposed this way of living on everybody. And so, if you didn't want to change, well, it was easy. We just have to, you know, dispose the people. Then came the illness. I have a question for you now. How many people were living in America before the arriving of Christopher Columbus in 1492? Let's say 1 year before. Yeah?
The Eskimos. The Eskimos.
The Eskimos, but how many were they? How much? 8,000? Okay. We'll do a little test here, okay? I'll give you four possibilities, okay? They were in America from Terre de Feu, from the Chilean border, up to the northern part of Canada, where the Eskimos used to live, okay? In all America, how many people? Let's say 100,000. Let's say 500,000, a million, or 100 million. So 100,000, 500,000, a million, or 100 million. Who would say the first one? Okay, 2, 3. Who would say the second one? 500,000, okay. Who would say the third one? A million, 1. Who would say 100 million people? Not so, okay, yeah, 4, okay. The right answer is number 4. 100 million, and even more than that, were living in America before the arriving of Christopher Columbus. It's quite incredible. What we've learned in our, you know, in our schools, in our history classes, it was that territory was deserted from their population. This is the saying that we have. This is the they always taught us that they were savage. They had no technology. They were not an advanced society. They were not organized. They were living like, you know, savage. This is what they taught us. And even that there were almost nobody here. By searching on the way back, looking at these archaic society from different times, from the first time of occupation, from 13,000 years ago up to the time that Christopher Columbus arrived, we end up with the number over 100 million of people living here. Let's take, for example, the city of Mexico is built on an ancient Aztec city, which was named Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan. In Tenochtitlan, by the time Cortés arrived there, there were 2 million people living there before the arriving of Cortés. And just by Tenochtitlan, there is an old city that was built 4,000 years ago, which is named Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan, with the sun pyramid and the moon pyramid. Okay, probably some people went there. I went there when I was young, and I was amazed because in 1900, those pyramids were mountains covered with grass. covered with dust, covered with sand, covered with earth and trees. And they cleaned everything, and it was that big of fire. So they say that at that time of the great city of Teotihuacan, there were between 2 and 3 million people living in the surroundings. It's quite impressive. The city of St. Louis, you know the city of St. Louis just by the Mississippi River? The city of St. Louis is built on an ancient First Nation, First People society. And this community, they took earth and they built places where they could crop during the rise of the Mississippi River, during the flooding. So they could crop, and they built those. They say in French, tertre de terre. So it's like we're building, you know, stories of earth to crop, and they crop during that time. And it is said that that community was close to 100,000 people living there. When Jacques Cartier took his boat and he went down the St. Lawrence Valley up to Hochelaga, when he arrived at Hochelaga on Montreal Island, there were between 6 to 7, 8,000 people living in the surroundings of Hochelaga, and they were named at that time Iroquois de la Vallée du Saint-Laurent. Today we say Chaudenassi. There were these people living there, and these people cropped the land. They were cropping corns and beans and squash, and they were living on the ground and from the land. They were living from the land. So Cartier arrived there in 1534. By the time Champlain arrived in 1608, there were nobody living in the valley of Saint Laurent. Nobody was living from Quebec up to the Long Sault, here in Carillon. There, it was deserted from their population. Even the city of Hochelaga disappeared. We're always, you know, searching, looking for traces of the city of Hochelaga on the island of Montreal, and we didn't find the place because at that time, you know, the navigators, the explorers were cartographed too. They were drawing maps, right? But their maps were not really precise because in those days they knew the latitude, but they didn't know the longitude. Longitude, which means the fuseau horaire. How do you say fuseau horaire? The fact that in fuseau horaire, you know fuseau horaire? Time zone, the time zones, yeah. So the longitude helped us to determine time zone, okay, on planet Earth. But in those days, they had no time zone. They were just living with the sun. When the sun was up, it was a day, and when the sun was down, it was night. So what did happen for to arrive to that constat that they were 100 million of people, but what we were thought there were nobody. It's because we inherited the narratives from the time after Champlain, not from the time of the first contact. So our narrative is built on the time of Champlain. When Champlain arrived there were nobody. So they were right, but they didn't go in the way in the past to find out the real story. And what happened? Diseases, illness. Those illness, there were smallpox. It was rougeole. It was picote volante. How do you say picote volante? Yeah.
Is it chicken pox?
Chicken pox. Yeah. That it took 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 died of these illness. And probably 1% died of the wars. So 90% of the people died of the illness. That means that here we are close to 20. After 100 years, only 2 families would have survived out of the 20 families that we are here. It's quite incredible. So this is what happened. The first contact was one of wars, control over a territory, and mainly of illness. This is why we have that story. So the narrative that we inherited is the one after the illness. And they talked about, the way they used the old blankets full of smallpox to destroy one village and one thing, one that. So all these stories happen after the arriving of Champlain. Because before, it was way different, okay? What we see here, so I have another slide, okay? We see that in 1534, the Montagnais were living near to Canada, and the Iroquois or Shawnee were living in Hochelaga. The Algonquin were occupying our territory. So by the Algonquin, we talk about the Anishinaabe, okay, mainly Anishinaabe, or sometimes they will name them the Whiskerines. So the Whiskerines were living in our territory. They were going down south during summertime up to the Ottawa River, and then during the winter, they would go way up north to the Lac Nomineng. You know where Lac Nomineng is? So they were traveling through the woods, going up there to Lac Nomineng. It's quite an incredible journey, you can imagine. And those Algonquin, they were hunters, they were berry pickers, they were fishermen. And they didn't took their canoe up the Red River. You know the Red River? It's not canoeable. Eh? It's not a navigable river because of the streams and everything. And doing the portage on the side, so they were probably walking. So they walked the land the same way that the Scots did in the 1800s. When they arrived there and they settled the valley, the Scots and the Irish, they did the same, and they probably took the same path. Because in those days, when the Scots arrived there were still Algonquin going from north to south. Probably a couple of survivors of the Whiskerines were there. And we have here, this here is the long soup in Carillon, the big chute of Carillon. Because before the dam in Carillon, there was a big chute. And the chute, the fall was about probably 2 height from my feet to my finger, twice me. So probably around 16 to 20 feet. It was a big chute. So everybody had to stop on the river, get off the river, do some portage, and travel on the Ottawa River after that. They had 3 big rapids or chute or falls on the Ottawa River from Grenville to Carillon. Some of you probably remember the time before the first dam before they built the dam at Carillon. It was a dam there too. That dam was built in 1881. So the new dam, today's dam, the Hydro-Québec dam, is the second dam that they built on the Ottawa River. Okay. So we have here Montagnais, that's the valley. And this was deserted of their population by the time Champlain arrived here. Okay? Because of the illness. It was probably a sacred valley. This is how they put it. They said nobody goes there because of the illness. So for almost 100 to 150 years, no First Nation went in the valley of Saint Laurent because of the illness. It was kind of a forbidden valley for them. So when a territory is not occupied by other people, what happened? Those who come after, they settle. So this is how the French settled in the Saint Laurent Valley. Okay. So, and we found that the decline of population in the Saint Laurent Valley was the same as the first population and disease I showed you from all America. So we suffer the same way. 9 people out of 10 were killed by the diseases. It's quite incredible when you think about that. Huh? It's probably new information that you never heard of. I know it's shocking. It's a shocking, but this is the story that we have to tell because it's the reality. Okay, we're changing the narratives. Yeah, we talk a lot about that, and normally in other part of Canada, an historian would come and talk and would say, we are now in the place where people used to live before us, and we're recognizing the fact that those people were here before we came. So we're by recognizing, sorry, we are admitting that they were here, okay, and we're creating a dialogue which didn't exist in the 1900s, okay, because the dialogue was closed. No, they were not important people. Now we're recognizing there. Yeah. So, change. We have First Nation on the Ottawa. We have the Olam-Chalanan on the southern part, Ontario, Hawkesbury, all these places. We have the Wescarenes here. We have the Kishisapirini over the Gatineau Valley. And we have all the Shipirini, when it's ending by Rini or Mi, means they were Algonquin or Anishinaabe, okay? Anishinaabe origin. The Olam-Chalanan were more like Iroquois or Shawnee, like we say. So we know that the Olam-Chalanan were there and that the Wescarenes were there. And they were fighting to get the control over Carillon, because Carillon was the passage to go way up in the west to the Nipissing and what we call the Pays d'en Haut at that time. The Pays d'en Haut were not the Laurentian, it was the big lakes, the Great Lakes, okay? They were establishing commercial entente agreements, traveling from everywhere. They were traveling people. They moved a lot all over the territory. We know at the time that Champlain arrived in Argenteuil on the Ottawa River in 1613, that they had a village on the St. Andrew's Golf Course. There were a village there. Can you picture St. Andrew Golf Course where it is? It's we have the North River here going up, and it's just that little piece of land here. So probably some people from the Iroquois nation settled there. They settled there from, I would say, 3,000 years ago, and they were controlling the passage for everybody to come up there. And by living there, they cropped the land. So we dig the ground there on the St. Andrew's Golf Course, and we found certain artifacts that I would show you at the end of the presentation. And those artifacts were tools. Coming. So they were agricultural tools. So they were cropping the land. They were the corns, I would say, and they moved, eh?
Farming.
They were farming. Thanks. They were farming. So they were the first farmers. It's quite incredible. And they were moving on the land. They moved from the peninsula, North River Peninsula, up to the Red River Valley, up between Saint Andre and Saint Hermas. And they moved up to Grenville. and they crop the land there too. So we know that because we dig the ground. The archaeologists dig the ground and they found tools. They not only found arrowheads, they found tools that I would show you. Okay. Yeah. That's we call that a topological graphic, okay? When Hydro-Quebec decide to put on a new electrical line or a pylon or whatsoever, they have to do that now. So they get a company, a special archaeologist company, and they come here and they evaluate the archaeological potential or the potentiality that people settle in certain places so that they will not put a pylon electric over a sacred land, okay? So they do that. And by doing that, see the red here, the red circle, that means that that was a place that was people settled there from way back in time. And we know that in Lachute it's the same thing. But I do not have the map up to Harrington, but we know that they traveled through the land. So they farmed there, they farmed in the southern part, but they were living in the northern part, okay? Yeah. Great. So this is a map that I took the liberty to pinpoint places where they lived at the time of Champlain. Okay, so we have here Ile Carillon, the Ottawa River is here, and that map is 1725. Okay, so that's really an old map. We have the North River here, and this is the St. Andrews North Shores. So we know by digging the ground that we have people live there. People live here. There was a burying ground because the Shawnee, when they died, they put the corpses underneath the ground, just like we did. They would do this, the same funeral practice that we are doing. Okay. We had a village here in Granville, and that's it. And the places of the Battle of the Long Sault. So we found artifacts here. We found artifacts here. There was a deputy from Argenteuil, Cunningham, what was his name? Cuttingham. He used to work at the old St. Andrews Cemetery, and he used to dig the ground to put the tombstones in it, and so he was the grave digger. Okay, and he told a journalist, Norman Torburn, who used to work for the Watchman, about the fact that there were Indians buried there close to the cemetery. So by saying that, we know that there was a village close by, and that was on Carillonville. Okay, so because if they buried their people, sometimes they would carry a bit of bones with them, and they moved along the territory. So that means that they propped that place, they farmed that place, and they moved around. But that was probably about 1,000 to 2,000 years before our time. Okay, so it's quite interesting. So these are the archaic artifacts that they found by digging the ground. The archaeologists came here in 1957. They came here in 1963. They came in Argenteuil in 1971. 3 times they came here, and every time they found artifacts. So first people artifacts. Sometimes it was a arrowheads, pottery, or old digging stones. So this looks like nothing, but that was used to dig the ground. You had not cutting the trees, but you know when they did the canoe, the first canoe, it was like a pirogue, and they had to remove all the heart of the tree. So they used that to do that. okay? And that was used to crush the corn, to do some flour. And with the flour, they did that special bread, the banik. Yeah. That's an ancient axe. Looks like a rock, but it was, it probably worked and with a certain chisel, and they made that axe out of stone. So were they living in the Stone Age? Probably, huh? Because they had no metal, no iron. Okay, so they were using the rocks. Okay, and that was found in St. Andrews. It was a farmer down in Red River, between St. Andrews and St. Hermas, who just decided to open a new field, and he ended up finding with those findings. So he called the archaeologists in Ottawa, and they came down and they found this and certain arrows, certain pottery too. So probably that means that the little village was in where they settled a little village there. So that's a tanoir that was used to remove the flesh from the skin of the animals. Okay. When we talk about furs, do the First Nation used to show the furs of the animal when they were wearing the no, the furs were there, it was inside of the coats. You know why? It was warmer, and the skin, so the cuir, they're protecting them from the snow and from the rain. So when the French people arrived there and they saw these old furs, they wanted that old furs because it had almost it was just like a fur, right? Felt. So that was the fur and the felt that they used to make the hats. Yeah. So that was used for that, and this is really ancient. That's about 4,000 years ago. Pipe fragments. They were smokers. Eh? They cropped tobacco. And those pipe fragments, they were probably made from stones in Calumet. So this is how Calumet inherited his name, because of that. Because in Calumet, they had a special rock there that the first people used to make those pipes. So that was, we found that in Grenville. Arrowheads, different ones. More sophisticated, ancient one, black ones, was particular to our territory because we have a Grenville, the Grenville rocks, and a part of the Grenville rocks is really black. Have you seen driving the 50? Okay, when they pass the highway through the mountains, they cut the mountains, okay? And you would see certain strides of black rocks in the mountains. So that was probably the same rocks that they took to make those arrows. It's quite incredible. It's really particular here in Argenteuil because that rock is part of the oldest rock on planet Earth. Yeah, it's incredible. It was probably part of a bigger continent that was named the Laurentia. The Laurentia had the highest mountain on planet Earth. Back in those days, I would go back to 1 billion years ago, those mountains would be 10 kilometers high. So that was higher than the Mount Everest. Quite incredible. What happened? So the use of time, right? Ice Age, a big meteorite who came down from the sky that destroyed almost every traces of dinosaurs here. You know, in the prehistorical history of Quebec, we have no traces of dinosaurs here, living here. You know why? Because about 200 million years ago, there was a big meteorite that, whoa, hit near Manicouagan. Today, we call this place Île René-Levasseur. And in the day that they built Manic Saint, you know, the big dam, Manic Saint, okay? You can look it up on the Google Earth, okay? When they finished the dam, they flooded everywhere around. You know, they built the dam between two mountains. So they flooded and came that island. And from the sky, we call that the Eye of Quebec. Yeah. And from the sky, you see, wow, it looks like something not natural. It is not natural. That was a big meteorite that hit the Earth, planet Earth, 200 million years ago. And it went deep, 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 deep in the Earth crust. But on the way, from the first second it hit the ground, everything burned. From Île René-Levasseur to Toronto, everything burned for about 1,000 years. So it kind of melt the rocks, you know, were melting and everything. So this is why we have the strongest rocks here, because of that meteorite. It's quite incredible, right? And this is why we do not have any traces of dinosaurs here. We have traces of dinosaurs living in the southern part, well, in New Hampshire, or you go down to Connecticut, because the surrounding of the fire was a big circle. It's quite incredible. But you could look it up on Google Earth, okay? And we have Pisson de Poterie, so pottery, okay? And this is really particular. Those little stripe here, okay? This is recent, this is older, okay? And it represents the corn. So les pieds de maïs, like this. It was, you know, raising up in the sky about 6 feet high, eh? And at that time they were practicing what they call the tree system, which is a symbiosis between the corn, the maïs, squash, and beans. Yeah. Algonquin dictionary. On the first contact, they have to communicate. So they have to learn each one language so that they could learn their ways. And you can tell, you can be certain of one thing. The French who came here, they really needed to have the inputs from the First Nation on how to live here. It was not the same as it is now. It was colder, really colder. Winters were long. How did they survive? You know, how they managed to live with the mosquitoes, and then with the black flies, and then with the ton à cheval. I always say ton à cheval in English. Yeah, yeah. They had to live with that. And especially here, you know, walking through the woods, going up north with the mosquitoes living there. Oh, it must have been incredible. So some of them taught the French to use cedar oil. Huh? So you just take the little beans of cedar and you crush it, and there's a little oil, and you use that, and that's a mosquitoes repellent. Natural way. It's not the awful whatsoever that we have now. Just that, just the cedar. So they taught them to use the cedar. But it's not the good way. We know the good way. So they were probably not listening. It's the same thing as Champlain. Eh? You know, Champlain, when he arrived there in Argenteuil, he stopped at Carillon. They were traveling by canoe, big Rabesca canoe. That were like boats about that, as wide as the room here. And Champlain was canoeing, and finding that way, it's a good way of transportation and everything. So they arrived at the big chute at Carillon. And so the people that were accompanying him told him, we have to do portage. And he said, oh, portage. I don't want to carry on my big canoe. It's too many rocks. It was steep. It was steep by the side of the fall. So he decided to pull his canoe on the rocks on the side of the fall. Okay. So he tied his hand on his canoe and he pulled it. And they were traveling at that time in the springtime. You know why? Because the water was really gonflé, and there were no leaves on the trees, so they could see through the woods if there were enemies and everything. But mainly because there were no mosquitoes. Yeah, that was easier for them. So he pulled his canoe on the rocks by the side of the big fall, and with the fume of the water coming up, dropping on the icy rocks, it happened what happened, was meant to happen. Champlain lost his foot. He lost his foot, 1 foot. And by the time he tried to put his foot down, his canoe started rolling in the big chute in the rapids like that. And Champlain had his hand tied to the canoe. So what happened to Champlain? Whoa! In the water, in the cold water of the Ottawa River. And Champlain almost drowned that morning there in that was the 1st of May, 1613. The 1st of May, he almost died there at Carillon. So you can imagine, if it wasn't for the courage of one of the First Nation people who was accompanying Champlain through his voyage, that jumped into the cold water of the Ottawa River and saved Champlain from drowning. Probably that big fall that we always call Carillon Fall would have been named the Champlain Fall. Can you imagine? I would have been, really we're famous all around the world. So people would come from China, Japan, Mexico to take pictures of the place where Champlain died. And that was not the case. He survived, and he wrote that the misadventure in one of his récits de voyage, and he wrote, I almost had my hand cut by the strength of the water. And after that, during all the other voyage that he took with the first people, he always listened to them. Yeah.
How did he lose his foot?
Well, he stepped on ice because the rocks were icy.
No,
He lost his footing. Yeah.
not
Oh, he lost his
his foot.
footing. Oh, sorry, that was a
Not
bad
foot.
traduction. A bad translation. I'm sorry. Yeah, he lost his footing. Yeah, he lost his footing. Yeah. So they learned the language of these people and they took notes. And this is written in Old Français. So in Old Français, it was more of phonetic writing than a academic writing. Okay, and it's the same here. So we have words like chicken, saromagaroa. And probably the S was a sh, because the language of the first people were more like that. So funny, probably those things you can find on the internet everywhere. Okay, so if you're really interested, you just write on Algonquin dictionary and everything will come up. You can change. We're talking about Champlain. Okay. So, as for all narratives, sometimes we misplace people. Okay, we have image of people that are not the real one. Okay, so this man here supposed to be Samuel de Champlain. Okay, but it is not Samuel de Champlain. We can switch. That's him. Michel Particelli. He was an accountant for the king of Spain. And we have no image whatsoever of Samuel de Champlain. At that time, they had no phone, they were not taking any pictures, and they didn't even draw in a painting of Champlain. So they built an image, and it was Morin, French historian from 1854, who decided at that time that probably Samuel de Champlain would look like Michel Particelli. And from that day, we decided that Champlain would look like this guy. It's quite incredible, eh? And it was one historian, I think it was in 1995, that discovered this supercherie, okay? So we can switch. That's the only drawing of Champlain. He's in action. He's in action in a war against the Iroquois. Okay, so we can't see his face. We could turn on. The only faces of Champlain that we have that we think he put himself into an action. It's on one map that he brought in 1612, and he put his face in the sun. So he had no mustache, no beard, no nothing. But it's a supposition, okay? So at the time of the first contact, this is how Champlain drew Lake Champlain, St. Lawrence River, Montreal, and then the Ottawa River, the Red River here. So he encountered all these places and he drew these maps of these places. It doesn't look like what we know today, but it was probably, they didn't have any ways to look at the earth from the top, eh? Bird's view, had a bird's view of the earth. We today can do it. We have satellites, we have planes, we have helicopters, but in those days they had to go on top of the ridges and the mountains to see, okay, this is what it looked like. So we could draw valleys and everything. So they were stuck with maps. But for the first people, the First Nation who were living on this land for thousands of years, how do they knew their ways on the territory? It was probably transmitted by the elders to the youngsters. And they knew that when you arrive in that certain type of valley, there would be a river down the valley. And that river would go up to a lake. And on that lake, in that lake, you could fish that type of fishes. You could have that type of animals living around. They knew that. They knew their way everywhere. They had no maps. And they could travel from Quebec to the Great Lakes by knowing where were the passage and everything. So all the maps, everything was inside them. It was like a cultural or anthropological whatsoever, knowledge that was inside them. They knew their way. They knew that, oh, okay, if the trees are like that, it's not a good place to stay. We should go somewhere else. We should pass through some other places because probably here it was too windy. The way that the moss grew on certain trees, it would say that the ground is not a good ground for farming. So they were evaluating everything. They knew everything. So can you imagine when the first people came here and settled these land, if they had those information, would they have settled here? I don't know. I don't know. But what we know is that those who came here, they look at this place and say, it looked like our home. So we decided to settle here because we knew that type of ground or that type of land was filled with rocks, but we know how to crop these land, and they survived there, just the way that the first people survived on these land. It's quite incredible. Yeah. Yeah, okay, great. So that's a map of a French surveyor, Chaussegros de Léry, who came in Argenteuil and draw a map in 1722. In those days, nobody lived in Argenteuil. Nobody. There were people living here, not that we know, that we knew of. We knew that they were here, but there were no French because they couldn't guarantee that they were safe because of the wars. There were wars against the Iroquois. And by the time that they signed the Great Peace of Montreal in 1701, and the time that they decided to let the people settle those places, the foreign parts of New France, it took like almost 22 years. So the first one came here, the first French settled right here on Terre Sauvignon and on Ile Carignan. And some of them decided that the places that there were a village before would be the best place to build the seigneur home, right? Because this is the way they were thinking. They were conquerors. How do conquerors proceed? Always by building their stuff over the old ones, okay? This is how it ended up with a church over a big pyramid in Puebla, in Mexico. They built a cathedral over the pyramid. And you could look it up on the internet. The town is Puebla, and the cathedral is the Spanish cathedral is right on top of the pyramid. But they probably never thought that this mountain could have been a pyramid. It's quite incredible, right? So we have maps here, 1824. Okay. When the French, and after that, after the conquest with the Brits, we organized the townships of Argenteuil. All during that time that the pioneer family came and settled, there were first people, First Nation living on these lands. They were not living all year long. They were passing by. They were traveling. They were coming from the south in the summer and going up to the north. There's that story, probably you heard about it. Some of you heard about it, of Michel Chichip. There's a mountain on the other side of the Red River. The mountain is called Michel Chichip's Mountain, Chichip's Mountain. So Chichip's and his family, they were nomads. They traveled on the land. So every time that winter, spring arrived, people here knew that Chichip and his family would come. And they offered Chichip and his family places to stay. Okay, you could put your tent here, or you could live in the barn, or you can come. And they were sitting with Michel Chichip and talking about the old ways of the people here. And Michel Chichip, he was really fond of everybody that he met. And he took the time to tell those stories to these people, how they survived from generation to generation. And he did that all the way back, just like, he was bringing he was the historian of this territory. And he did that. So he did that up until, the Chichip family did that up until the 1940s, like they said. It's quite incredible. And they had no places where they lived all year long. They were just traveling on the land. You can imagine today doing that? I'm not sure. Everybody has fences on their land. So, people arrived in St. Andrews. Some of them arrived in Granville. And when they arrived in Granville, the Scots, they walked up to here by the old Indian path, Scotch Road. So imagine the Scotch Road there. That was the way they were traveling up to here. Up to here, and then to Lost River, and then over Lake McDonald up to Rouge Valley near Argenteuil. So they walk by the same path. They use the same path that not the Kilmore Road. Kilmore Road was open because of the mine. Yeah. But the Scotch Road, that was the antenna of traveling in those days. Today, can we travel from south to north on the Scotch Road? Is it still blocked by a river, the river crossing the road? Do you know that? No? Huh?
You can still drive the truck.
You could, yeah, it's rough, but when the water is high, does the river still cross? Because at one time, we used to, I tried to cross on the and we encountered a river that was right over the road, and we said
You got to bring the Wilson Lake and maybe in spring.
it was in spring, it was flooded, and we decided to cross whatsoever, but by the time I said to the driver, I said, oh, it doesn't look that deep. By the time we ended up the middle of the river, the car was lifting. It was lifted by the water. It was quite an adventure. Yeah. So you can imagine in 1816, 1820, when those people walked up to here. But they walk up to here since way in time. 4,000 years ago, they walk up to here. They were doing that before the Scots arrived. It's quite incredible, right? And when the families cut the trees, start cropping, and they had their wheat or their oats, they had to go down to the mills, the Kingsley mills. That was close by the 50. It was close by the 50 now. And the Kingsley mill was the closest mill to mold the flour, right? So they had to walk back down there with their big bags. It's quite incredible. Sometimes stories told us that it was the women who used to walk down there and carrying that 100 pounds of flour on their shoulder and walking up back up to here in the same day. Yeah, they endure hardship, right? But probably, they were doing it because it was the way it was, right? Same as the first people. They were doing it because it was the way it was, and they knew their way in those on those mountains, on those roads. Quite incredible. Yeah. So we can switch. We have the Ottawa River here. We can switch again. Okay, that's the map of the Long Sault. Okay. So that's probably the places Champlain almost drowned here. Okay, that was the first portage, and then we had the second portage because of Chute de Blondeau, and we had the big Long Sault drive from Grenville to Grease's Point. That was the original river. Okay, today everything is flooded. Okay, when you arrive in Grease's Point, the water is almost at the height of the road, eh? But before the dam, the water was 60 feet lower, okay? And right here is the deepest part of the Ottawa River. It's about 360 feet deep. That brings us back to almost the formation of the territory for a billion years ago. Okay? So we have that here. Ah, you know that man?
Dollar days, you know?
Yeah. Wow, great. What? You will have the right to take a cookie.
That's your prize.
That's your prize. So, Dollar des Ormeaux, okay? that's another narrative that we had from the old days, and all the story of the Lord of Zormo was a something happened, you know, a war happened. It was in times of war, of territorial control and everything. But the way that they told the story, you know, it's like sometimes it became a caricature of itself, eh? Because they say that the Lord des Ormeaux almost fight against 700 Iroquois, okay? And he survived for more than 10 days fighting against them at the Long Sault. People said that the battle happens in Carillon. Some people said the battle happened in Augsburg. Okay, so you can imagine with a story, well, a personage like Delors des Ormeaux, who became a national hero for French Canadian, to know that he didn't fight in Quebec, but that the battle happened in Ontario. That means that they didn't choose the right hero, eh? Yeah. So it was hard for them to admit that there was probably some fabrication, you know, a creation of the mind instead of a real story. So, yeah.
How many men?
Well, they were 17 French, so 17, plus they had 40 Huron and that, so and 4 Algonquin. So they were 61. So there was a party of 61 who left Montreal in the month of May 1660. And they were going up to the Long Sault because they wanted to liberate the passage. Because Pierre-Esprit Radisson was up in the Pays d'en Haut, coming back with furs, with lots of furs that they would probably save the New France, right? Because they had no money, and that furs were really important for the King of France to continue to invest in the settlement of New France. Okay, so they went there and they encountered almost 200 warriors that they were waiting there to attack Montreal. They were supposed to attack Montreal. There were 200 warriors in Carillon, and there were 500 warriors in Lake Champlain. So what they did, they sent an emissary to Lake Champlain to say to those 500 to come and join us here in Carillon. So they ended up 700 warriors to fight against those 61. But the 61 didn't stay 61. Because in those days, you know, they were a free agent. Most of the Hurons didn't want to die in that battle, so they decided to join the party of the warriors. So and 39 of them switched team. So instead of playing with Montreal, they played with Boston. So some of the warriors, you know, convinced them to join them in that battle. But that battle ended up with a big explosion because the Lord des Ormeaux probably had, you know, he decided to throw a barrel of powder in the other side of the where they were protected by a little fall, and he threw the barrel. The barrel came back in the Fortin and explosion. And they say that 3.5 Frenchmen survived. One was he was really hurt, and there were a couple of Algonquin who survived too. And the story came from one of the Algonquin told the story to the English, and then the English told the story to the Spaniard, and then the Spaniard told the story to the Hollandais, the Netherlands, and then it came back to the French after. So it's like the Arab telephone. Eh? But you know what we know about the story is that there was one Algonquin, Louis, who told that story when he survived the war, and he survived he was a prisoner and he got away from the warriors, and he went back to the Jesuit and he told that story. And we know too that after the battle, Pierre Esprit Radisson walked through the battlefield and he saw what really happened there. Did he pinpoint exactly where it was? No, no. But you know, today we can't find more traces because of the flooding of the dam, Carignan Dam. So the Carignan Dam kind of eliminated any possibilities to dig the ground to find the real place. What is said that, well, we could switch, is that on the Ross farm in Argenteuil, they found traces of that battle, you know, with arrowheads and gunpowders and everything. Some of the French historian said that it was another battle because many battles happened on the Ottawa River in those days. Probably one in 1690, so 30 years later on. But today we can't go back there and dig the ground to find more traces because it's all underneath water. So we are still in a no man's really what kind of type of, is it the real story? Gimmich things. We're all speculating. But you know, this is the way that the French dropped the battle, okay? And we have Ballard as a whole right here, you know, with his barrel. And he was one of the greatest heroes for the French Canadian people. So it's kind of hard for them to accept the fact that he probably was not that type. But, you know, we know that there was a war. We know that there was a battle on the Ottawa River. So, and we celebrated it. Right? We could switch. We could switch. Yeah, so these were the archaeologists by the Ottawa River on the Ross Farm where they found the traces. And this is Lombard and Rigby who did their story on the Quebec side. Those two here were working with the museum in Carillon. So Miss Lambert and Dr. Rigby, they wrote a special paper in the Histoire de l'Amérique française on the site of the battle. Yeah.
Did they have horses then?
Horses. You mean the First Nation? No.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
No, they didn't have any horses. You know that the horses, they were not in America. Horses, they travel, they brought, they brought the horses from Spain to America. Yeah. So that was one survey map, and this is where they pinpoint the site of the battle on the Quebec site. And do you know that blé d'Inde? You know blé d'Inde, which is the corn, okay, corn. In French, they call it blé d'Inde, but they say blé d'Inde because it probably come from India. When they arrived there, they thought that they arrived in India. So this is why they named those people Indians. Yeah, because of India. But they misplaced everything. And blé d'Inde, it's not the real name. The real name is maïs. Corn, maize. So it's not Indian corn. It's maize. And the people here, they taught the European lots of things. And they gave them lots of things too to eat. Potatoes. All the potatoes come from here. Never come from Ireland.
The corn as well.
The corn too. And you know what? Tomatoes. The tomatoes comes from here, America. So it's not the Italian who invented the tomatoes. They learned it from here. They probably invented the sauce, the pizza sauce, yeah, or the spaghetti sauce, the meatballs too, but you know, tomatoes come from here. Okay, avocado, the avocado come from here. Certain berries, they come from here. Strawberries, blueberries. The blueberries is particular in Quebec. Lac Saint-Jean, yeah. And, yeah. So we learned a lot from them. Yeah. Okay. So This is a lot of Zormo, the way they pictured him, right? Looks like me. Yeah. That's another way that they pictured him, you know, he was well combed and everything, had a great the mustache and the little pinch here, right? It's really typical. Ah, that's Alfred La Liberté. This is one of the, that bust here. We have it at the museum. It's gonna be exposed in the new exhibit that we're gonna have in at Christ Church in St. Andrews. And you see, it's a dramatic Dollar de Zormo. So that was made in 1919 when they decided at that time that we're going to switch the La Fête de la Reine, the Queen's Day, Victoria Day, okay, to Dollar de Zormo Day, okay. So they asked Alfred La Liberté, was a great sculptor, French Canadian sculptor, to do a bust of Dollar de Zormo, but a real dramatic one, you know, like he's confident, but he's not really sure. Is he talking with God? Is he, you know? So he's the messenger. Yeah, celebration of Dollar de Zormo. Okay, what is there to remember through all that? Okay, we have no places that we celebrate or remember the passage of all these people who lived there before us. I mean, 1,000 years ago. What is there to remember? Little artifacts. When we dig the ground, we found traces, and we are constructing a narrative over all these little pieces of places. But there's no place that says the Scotch Road was the road that they used to go from south to north. And every people took that road, no matter what they're coming on. Okay, they were First Nation, they were First People, they were Scots, they were Irish, they were French Canadian. It doesn't say that, but now you know. Now you can tell your children or grandchildren about it. That Scotch Road is a special road. Okay, it's the way that they took. It's by there that they travel. The Ottawa River, same thing with the Ottawa River. Same thing with the Red River. You know, there was a big battle with the ship Chaudière Noire down at the Red River on that place that they call the Table Rock. You know the Table Rock? Okay, there was a big battle there against the French, and it's probably the place that Chaudière Noire died. He died there. You know, those stories are not told. We should tell these stories about those people. So what is there to remember? We need to create what? A monument. We need to write on the side the road panel. This was the original road, Scotch Road. And here, the valley, same thing, you know. They came here. What did they want? So what is there to remember? This. You know that? Ever been there? Yeah? That's Carillon. That's the monolith in Carillon. Okay? That's the celebration of a memory, of a time that we are not really certain what did happen. But we decided to create this to remember. There are 18 monoliths. How many French people were there? I told you there were 17. So there is one monolith for every French who died at that battle. Even one for Dollar de Zormo. The 18, the last one, that's the one for all the first people who fought there. 1 out of 7 out of 18. So that's probably the same proportion that we keep in our historical narrative about their passage here or their time here. It's quite incredible. We have to open up. We have to create dialogue. We have to interest ourselves. create this. We have to do that. My role here today was to open up that dialogue with you, that you are aware now. They were there before us, and they were so many, really so many, more than we were in Europe at that time. So, and there's a little plaque saying that they were there, Iroquois, Algonquin, who fought there with the French. Okay? So it's really a neat place to go. When you know the signification of all the monolith, why it is there, why do they build that there on the Hydro-Quebec site, on the Quebec site instead of the Ontarian site? They probably want to settle the battle for, forever by saying it happened here. Was it exactly here? No, but it happened on that river, on the north side, the north side, or on the south side. It doesn't matter, but the battle happened here. People fought there for liberty and for the surviving of New France. This is what it said. Yeah, but for the first people, they fought for their liberty. Yeah, yeah.
What town won that battle? Because the salt
Yeah, as a result, the native did not attack Montreal at that time. Uh,
they thought that they were more.
yeah, they were more than the people living in Montreal, but they did not, at first they wanted to do the attack. But what we can imagine that happened is that they suffered in that battle. They suffered too long. It was a 10-day battle. That was way too long. So they probably lost a couple of warriors, and then they had prisoners, and then they probably did not settle all that thing, but it was enough for them in those days.
Well,
That was enough.
I take it that the Indians didn't have rifles,
No, they did not have, no,
and the
Yeah.
French or
Yeah.
the people that were with them don't have
Yeah.
rifles.
they had rifles, but they had ways to protect themselves. They were building bouclier with trees, eh? So they were protecting themselves against the shots of the rifle, and those rifles was not, they were not automatic rifles, so they had to,
Black
yeah, black powder and everything, so it was approximative, eh? Well,
700 against 60 is quite a.
Yeah.
Quite something.
It's quite something, yeah. So those pictures were taken just at the opening of the site in 1967. So they built the monolith to celebrate the 100 years commemoration of the Confederation of Canada. So it was part of all of that, But in those days, in 1967, they didn't have any sensitivity throughout the first people history. Those are, they were by the canals in Carillon. So it was an indication of the distance that you travel on the canal. That one here, that's the Dollar des Ormeaux monolith. It was right in the middle of a little pool. And I had talked with Jacques Foltier, the monoliths, and he told me that they decided to put water around the Lac des Ormeaux so that the nature could start every spring at the feet of the Lac des Ormeaux. See, so that was how big a hero he was. There we go. It's a beautiful song, and it's still there. And it's really particular because that type of historical site or even arts, that's modern art. It's unique in Quebec. It's unique in Canada. It's like the Vimy statues. It's really incredible that we have that here in Argenteuil. And when we decided to do a historical path around the monolith, we decided to talk about the native narratives on those things. So anyway. Yeah. You have any questions?
Where's the Scotch Road located?
Oh, before arriving to the Kilmore Road, okay, you go to Lost River. You go to the main road. Yeah, yeah,
Before Trumbull?
yeah. And it's about could be about 5 minutes from you, the Scotch Road. Yeah.
You ever take 50?
Yeah.
Okay, so instead of going to Oxford, you go up to that.
Yeah, you go up the mountain. That's the Scotch Road. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. And the end is on the Argenteuil Road. Yeah. The valley road.